We go. Good morning. This is retired Pastor Karl Schmidt from Calvary Lutheran Church, the Lutheran Church in Amherst, New York. We welcome you to our internet broadcast this morning for Palm Sunday of 2023, kind of the end of the pandemic. We've been 3+ years into that nonsense, and I think everyone's so glad that, for the most part, everyone's vaccinated and boosted, and we all get to stay home when, we're coughing. And we don't have to wear so many masks anymore. People got that figured out. So we welcome you to Palm Sunday, and the text is the text, and we're just going to read the first part for you this morning. And when they drew nigh to Jerusalem and were come to Bethphage and to the Mount of Olives, then sent Jesus 2 disciples, saying unto them, Go into the village over against you, and straightway ye shall find an ass tied and a colt with her. Loose them and bring them unto me. And if any man say aught unto you, you shall say, The Lord hath need of them, and straightway he will send them. All this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet, saying, Tell ye the daughter of Zion, Behold, thy king comes unto thee meek, and sitting upon an ass, and the colt the foal of an ass. We're focusing just on verse 4. All this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet, saying. Now, sometimes words tell you a lot about what people are thinking. And that's the case here. That the scripture tells us a lot about an event that happened nearly 1,000 years before Jesus, which makes about 700 to 3,000 years beforehand. It really wasn't 1,000, more like maybe 500 to 700, whatever. Old Testament things are really hard to tell, especially with the prophets. But it's at least 500 to 700 years before Jesus was born that a prophet was given these words by God to speak. And they don't sound really all that extraordinary. I mean, listen to what the words actually say. Behold, your king comes unto you meek and sitting upon a donkey, and a baby donkey, basically, right? So how is that exciting? Your king is coming into town on a donkey. Excuse me. Chariot? At the head of a mighty army? A host of angels? No. Just some guy on a donkey. And, there's a little baby donkey too. So does that make it better? Just like the hymn writer pointed out that he came in this ridiculously lowly fashion. Put this way, God the Father is going to send his Son, the mighty Savior of the world. And so when he rides into the capital city of all of Israel, on the last week where he is going to do this magnificent job of rescuing all of humanity of all time and place from sin, death, condemnation, and everlasting doom, he's got 12 guys who don't really like him very much. One of them is a full-on traitor. The others kind of grumble amongst each other, but none of them are really educated. I mean, you got a bunch of fishermen, tax collector, the tollway guy, and, just some working stiffs, none of which are trained to be a rabbinic student. I mean, that was actually a thing back then. Seminary students, and they were trained, well studied. None of these guys, not one of them. And they lead the ragtag band that doesn't even have their own chariot. They don't have a car. So this is what Dad had in mind. This is the big thing. The big deal. And this is how he carries it out. And the prophet then says, all this time beforehand, the Mashiach, which is Hebrew for Christos, Christ. Messiah and Christ are the same word. Okay, one's Hebrew, Mashiach, Hebrew. Christos is Greek for Christ. Both of them translate to the same word in English, anointed one. That's all it means. And in fact, when the Jews translated the Old Testament into Greek for the emperor, for an emperor, who wanted to read the Jewish Bible, but he couldn't read Hebrew, but he could read Greek, so they translate, it's called Septuagint, and the Jews themselves use the word Christos, Christ, to translate the Hebrew word Mashiach. So in the Jewish translation made by the Jews themselves, representative of all the tribes of Israel, it does say Christos for Mashiach, Christ. So that is the word. It's not a name. It's not a personal name. It's about Jesus Christ. That's like saying Bob the plumber. Plumber's not his name. Christ is not his name. It's a job. Okay. So you got Bob the plumber, and you got a couple of guys, fishermen and some tax collectors and working stiffs who got yanked away from what they were supposed to be doing to earn a living, which made their wives and children very happy. You're doing what? You're not, you can barely read. And you dropped out of grade school. You're a fisherman. Yeah, but, okay, for how long? I don't know. What? How are we going to pay the bills around here? Well, not really sure about that either. Oh, it gets better and better. You're such a dead man. So you can imagine that all these families were really happy that their husbands were the disciples. Yeah. So now Jesus rides into Jerusalem, and what kind of reception does he get? Well, the authorities in Jerusalem really don't want to see him. Big surprise, they don't like him. Because he's already kind of spoken about them. Didn't go real well. You know, when you call someone a snake, someone who lives in a pit with other vipers, dirty scoundrel, thief, they might not be your friend. So no one really liked Jesus in town, among the leadership. The people, however, kind of liked him because he healed Grandma. Grandma had cancer, and he just walked along and then touched her, and she was fine. She went home and cooked us, brownies. So yeah, the people liked him. You know, little Johnny had a broken leg, and she just came along, and his shadow passed over Johnny. Johnny swung just fine. Life's great. He's out there playing soccer with the other kids. It's all good. So the people generally liked him, but the leaders really hated him because they were just jealous. Jesus, who had no specialized rabbinic training, he had no letters of authorization from the council in Jerusalem. I mean, the guy was rogue. He had no letters of approval, which, if you look on the wall over there, there's my stuff, and then inside here in the sanctuary, there's also another wall of documents. And those have been hanging since I went to seminary. Because at seminary, they give you legal documents. It's actually a legal document in all 50 states and other countries. Because a pastor has to have those to be a pastor. Otherwise, you're impersonating a pastor, which is a felony if you get paid for it. It's a felony in New York State, 5 years in prison. So those papers matter. They're important. Jesus had no papers. He couldn't even work in New York State. Get it? Totally rogue. Totally rogue. And so he comes in Jerusalem, and of course, the people welcome him and, have a little parade. And by the end of the week, they're like, didn't go well. Crucify him. Out you go. And the Sanhedrin meets and condemns him to death. And, the whole thing with Pilate and all that nonsense, and washes his hands. And his wife says, dude, that's why you're in Jerusalem. You're a loser. His wife didn't like Pilate very much, and things didn't go well for him anyways. It was the last step for a Roman politician to be in Israel anywhere, because they did not like Romans to begin with. It was their last stop. It wasn't your way up. It was the end of the way down. Josephus, you want to read more about a Roman historian who is a Jew? Josephus writes a lot about Pontius Pilate. So, yeah, if you want to know more, just go to the public library or go online. It's there. It's free. Anyway, so a week later, after they have a little parade for him, they're nailing him to a cross. So why is this a celebration 2,000 years later? Why are we observing Palm Sunday at all? What does it mean? Well, there's one word. I started by saying language matters. There's one word here in the Greek that tells us a lot. It's in verse 4, so we're going to focus on that. All this was done that it might be fulfilled. Look at the word fulfilled. That little word in Greek tells us a lot, because Greek is one of those crazy languages that is conjugated and declined and blah, 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 and you don't want to know. But anyways, what it means is it's third person singular. He, she, or it, right? In this case, he, the prophet. It's first aorist. It's something is going to happen that for all the time beyond it, mathematically it's a ray, not a line. A line goes both directions. A ray has a point and goes from there, right? Well, there's your math lesson for the day. This is a ray. The aorist is a voice in Greek that tells us something's going to happen, but its consequences are going to go out into eternity, forever. Okay. But it's in the subjunctive. Subjunctive is the Heinz ketchup commercial. You're waiting for the ketchup, right? Nothing happens. And they put it in a bottle that can't pour, and they make it just thick enough in viscosity that it won't pour. And so, of course, they make a commercial that is the one thing that makes everyone furious about their product, the lousy bottle, and it won't pour anyways. Good design. And that becomes the running joke for the company's ad campaign for dozens of decades, right? Oh, you can't pour our product. Can you imagine being at the ad department going, they're going to talk about this, aren't they? Anticipation, expectation, and nothing happens. So hundreds of years before Jesus came, the prophets were given these words to say, okay, something's coming. It's going to be this guy on a donkey riding into Jerusalem. Daughter of Zion, that's Jerusalem. That's what the prophets called Jerusalem, daughter of Zion. Okay. But what does it matter? Why is this a thing 2,000 years later where we get together and talk about it? Because it's not only in the subjunctive, it's in the passive. Meaning the prophet wasn't going to have anything to do about it. The prophet looked forward to it, but in his lifetime, nothing. Nada. And it took so many hundreds of years that even the Jewish people were like, waiting for the Messiah? No. What about Granddad? Granddad went, nah. What about 10 generations back, Granddad? Nah, he gave up. Nada. The Jews, their capital city, and their whole country was controlled by other countries. Always had been, at least for the last 1,000+ years since David. They lost their country to foreigners, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, captured them, dragged them off into Babylonia, and left them basically to die. You've heard of the 10 lost tribes of Israel? Yeah, they didn't come back. And they're called the 10 lost tribes of Israel. The only people that were left from those 10 tribes were crippled people who were shepherds, and they didn't want to bring them because they stink. You spend 3 days out in the field with sheep. You smell bad too, okay? And old men and old women, that's the only ones that were left by the Babylonians and the Assyrians of those tribes. So there was a little remnant, yeah, but not much. Not the cream of the crop. All the cream of the crop were gone. And then there were a couple of tribes that really nobody wanted. They were still there. And then they were ruled by others. And the Romans had been around for a couple hundred years already. Before them, Greeks and the Syrians and Babylonians and whoever else. Face it, nobody really wanted that area. It's mostly dead-end box canyons, in Hebrew called zin, just garbage land. And the water's radioactive. Yay! Any positives? It's hot. It's really hot. It's like 110 in the daytime. And the only body of water nearby has a salinity that you can walk across it practically. You can lay down on it and you float really high up because it's all salt. So yeah, not a great place to live. Nobody wanted that area. For what? The only thing there was trade routes. Nothing else. Nada. Nobody wanted it. So it's like, yeah, you guys want to take, no? Oh. All they wanted was control their own land. And they thought, God will save us. And God's like, no, I'm the one that sent the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and the Romans and the Greeks and everyone else. That was me. I did that. Yeah, because I was fed up with you idiots. You guys were the biggest clown circus ever. And I'm just quoting God. He said, I am so sick of being around you that I'm going to put my camp outside of where you people sleep because I can't stand to hear you. That's during the days of Moses. That's why God's Mishkan, the tent, Mishkan in Hebrew, was outside where the Israel camped. Because God said, if I have to sleep with you people, I'll kill you all by morning. And I'm quoting him. I can't stand you. He's talking about his own people. So he left them in captivities of one kind or another, living in this garbage land, the promised land. Even the tribes of Israel didn't want to go there once they saw the place. It's a land overflowing with milk and honey, just south or just north. But the actual land is garbage. And so this is Palm Sunday. The Son of God comes in on a donkey to a parade of poor folks in captivity living in Jerusalem, and their own leaders don't like him, don't want him, and 7 days later want to kids kill him. So why do we celebrate this? Why? The prophets who longed for this, lived in expectation, didn't see it. Okay. The Jews who saw it were unimpressed. Even the disciples, after it happened, were living in hiding. The resurrection, Jesus showed up 7 days later, and Thomas wasn't with them. And, if I don't see his hands and feet and blah, 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 and proof that he's, walking around talking, eating, I don't believe. So everything he'd seen and heard for the last 3 years was, didn't believe a word of it. And this is his own disciple. This is a student. You'd think these would be the cheerleaders, right? They're hiding. It's because they're afraid. So why are we observing this? For that very reason, that he didn't come in a tank, that he didn't bring the heavenly armies of the angels along with him, that he didn't come in power, majesty, and glory. Instead, he came with cheap clothing, Kmart clothing, nothing fancy, not purple, like he talks about the rich people live in palaces in purple garments and eat sumptuously. No. He said the foxes have holes to dig in, birds have nests. Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Didn't even own a hut. The guy down at the beach who's got a lean-to made out of beer cans is doing better than Jesus. And that's the very reason why we're celebrating. That is the reason. He came lowly. Why? To join us. To be with you. Because which one of us can belly up to God the Father and go, yeah, it's been a tough week, but, I'm perfect, so it's all going great for me. I got no problems. Nah. Yeah, wife and I got a perfect marriage. Things are ideal. Right, Kara? Yeah, see the wife back there. Yeah, it's 4.5 decades plus. If I have flaws, that woman knows them. More than any of you. And I've got 3 of my kids here. And their spouses and grandkids. And one of my grandkids looked at me and said, Pop is bad. That's my own granddaughter. Yeah, going real good. But of all the people here, that blonde-haired woman in the back there, she knows me best. And she knows. If she made a list of things wrong with me, she'd need a lot of paper and maybe a couple pens, okay? Because that's the wife thing. Wives don't. They know. They really know. But you know who knows me actually best? Who knows things I don't even tell her? The boss. He really knows. And that's a problem. That, in fact, is the problem. But he doesn't want that to be a problem. Just like a wife looks at you and goes, yeah, I'll sit next to you. I don't know why I'm sitting next to you. You don't deserve me sitting next to you. In fact, you should bow down and kiss my feet for sitting next to you, but I'll sit next to you. And the husband just goes, well, yeah, because I'm all that. And he goes, yeah, you are all that. A big steaming pile. No, you get the idea, right? And so God says, yeah, I'll sit next to you. So he sends his son to not only sit next to us, but to be counted with us. He didn't just come to go, yeah, well, luckily I'm here, but I'm not like you slobs. Drunken sots. You useless, worthless pile of... No. He goes, give me a beer. Pour me a glass of wine. What do we dance and do? Yeah. He didn't sin, but he lived with us. And he was counted with us. Meaning, for everything that's wrong with us, his father looked at him and said, yeah, that's my son. That's my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. And yet, I see him, as Isaiah said, the prophet of old, on him was laid the sins of us all. The most wretched. See, he's the sinless Son of God, and yet he's, according to the Father, he's the most wretched, stinking, filthy, rotten, cheating, no good, lying, spitting. Did I mention wretched? I might as well use wretched again. Wretched man who ever lived. Peter, in the boat, when he first figured out who this guy was, when they're catching all the fish, after catching nothing all night long, he stopped. He goes, oh, crud. I'm in the boat with God. He kneeled down and says, I am in a martelos on air. What he actually said in the English says, I'm a sinning man, sinful man. Actually, a martelos on air means I'm a wretched husband. I'm a lousy husband. Because an on air is a grown man who's married. So he just bows down, drops to his feet in the fish, and says, kill me. I'm a bad man. And Jesus goes, get up, don't be afraid. It's all good. I got this. That's why we get together. Because that's what the cross is. That's what all of this is. This is what religion is simply about. That God sent his son to be with us, to be one of us, to be counted with us. In fact, to be counted as the worst of us. And then to die for it. So that he gets punished and not you. Not me. And that's the mystery. That's the mystery of why the prophet longed to see this. He was in the subjunctive mood. He was anticipation, expectation, and his day never saw it. For the next 400 years, 500 years, nobody saw it. And then they saw it. And they didn't understand it. That's why we have sermons today to explain this. That this expectation, anticipation is still here. Because even though we are, like Luther put it once, he said, simul justus et peccator. We are wretched nonsense, and at the same time, we are the glowing sons of God, daughters of God. We are wretched and we are awesome simultaneously. And that's from your Father's point of view in heaven. And so it's like little kids. It's like little Gussie back there. He runs up to you, and he's got, his little Jello container. They just plopped on his head, mushed around, rubbed down his shirt, and you're like, oh, that's your new little outfit. But it's warm. Except for the Jello all over you. We'll never get that red out, ever. I've tried, trust me. What he did with sweet potatoes to one outfit, I've watched it, 4 or 5 times. I've put everything on it, including bleach. Nada. It's in there forever. And yet, you just go, oh, come here. And they're just so happy. That's what religion should be. For everyone. There are no exceptions because we're all in the same boat and he does the same thing for everyone. There's only one Jesus. And that's the beauty of it. There's no distinction between us. So, that's why Palm Sunday. End. So, yeah, I should turn this off.